Bihari Jaya Radha Madhupa Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopinanam Balavan Girivarudanti Jaya Gopi Channa Balavan Girivarudanti Gopinanam Balavan Girivarudanti Gopi Channa Paramahansa Paramahansa also Teta Sitashi Shimad His Divine Grace Abhaya Charanada Bhaktivedanta Goswami Marshalla Prabhupada Kijai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Kijai Anandakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Kijai Namacharya Srila Hridas Thakur Kijai Prem say Ho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidwaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Kijai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopakapata Sayam Kund Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Kijai Vrindavanam Kijai Mathuranam Kijai Jagannath Swami Kijai Yamunaya Kijai Shimari Talasi Devi Gajai, Samveda Bhakta Vrindi Gajai, Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaur Premananda. Big crowd watching us this morning. I want to welcome Pranay Chakravarti, Anuradha, very nice, and Radha Ranjani, Samuel King, Reshmi Lata, Vikas Chand, Prema Mandri, Raja Vanita Dasi, and Sunita Prasad. So, big crowd so far. It'll get bigger than the temple room. So, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 9th canto, 19th chapter, text 4. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Tasya udaranopayam vastaha kami vichintayan yadata tirtam udritya Vishanagrena Udasi Tasya Udaranopayam Vastakami Vichintayan Yadata Tirtamudritya Vishanagrena Rodasi Tasya Udaranopayam Vastakami Vichintayan Yadata Tirtamudritya Vishanagrena Rodasi Tasya Udaranopayam Vastakami Vichintayan Yadata Tirtamudritya Vishanagrena Rodasi. Anyone want to try?
Tasya Udaranopayam
Saki, it's good to see you.
Yadata Tirtamudritya Vishanagrena Rodasi Tasya Udaranopayam Vastakami Vichintayan Yadata Tirtamudritya Vishanagrena Rodasi.
I guess that's it. Okay, heavy verse. Fasten your seatbelts. Are you using the, you're not using the mouse? You know how to do it, right?
Yeah.
That's good. Tasya of the she-goat. Udarana upayam, the means of deliverance from the well. Vastaha, the he-goat. Kami, having lusty desires. Vichinteha, planning. Vyadata, executed. Tirtam, a way to come out. Udricha, digging the earth. Vishanatagrena, by the point of the horns. Rodasi, at the edge of the well. So translation. After planning how to get the she-goat out of the well, the lusty he-goat dug up the earth on the well's edge with the point of his horns in such a way that she was able to come out very easily. So you can repeat, after planning how to get the she-goat out of the well,
after planning how to get the she-goat out of the well,
the lusty he-goat dug up the earth.
The lusty he-goat dug up the earth
on the well's edge with the point of his horns in such a way that she was able to come out very easily. Okay, purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Attraction for a woman is the impetus for economic development, housing, and many other things meant for living comfortably in this material world. Digging up the earth to make a way out for the she-goat was a laborious task. But before accepting the she-goat, the he-goat underwent this labor. Aho vekshetra sutapta vitaj nasha mahoyam aham rameti. The union between male and female provides the impetus for gaining a nice apartment, a good income, children, and friends. Thus one becomes entangled in this material world. Satasya udaranopayam vastakami vijintiyam yadata tirtamudricha vishanagrena rodasi. So, Om Ganatimiranda Shah Yananjana Shlakaya Chakshuram Meditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So of course this is a metaphorical story, and the Vedas in Bhagavatam are full of metaphorical stories. And that one of the reasons for metaphorical stories is that generally people are not able to hear the direct point. You understand? Because if you tell someone, just like here, Yayati, obviously, Yayati is talking to his wife, Devyani. And if he was just to tell her directly, you know, this is Maya, Devi. You're in Maya, I'm in Maya, and this is disgusting, or whatever. Then it wouldn't have gone over very well. So many times to make a point, you have to really tell a story. And of course, the typical story that you hear in the Bhagavatam is in the fourth canto, is the Puranjana story. That you have Priyavrata who's become entangled. I mean, previously he wasn't entangled, he was forced to get married by Lord Brahma, even though the spiritual master said, don't get married. Interesting story, isn't it? Spiritual master was Narada Muni. And Narada Muni said, what? Don't get married. And then his Narada Muni's guru came and said, hey, don't instruct your guru like that, your disciple like that. It's interesting, isn't it? You're going to a higher authority. Which Priyavrata did. So anyway, so Narada Muni said, don't, and Lord Brahma, his spiritual master, said, do. And so Priyavrata, he gets married and then not. Anyway, and so in order to bring him out of that, then there has to be a story. Because you have the famous Puranjana story as a result of that. You know, once there was a king, O king. No, we're not talking about you, but we're talking about someone else. Puranjana, of course, the word Puranjana means every man, basically. Purajana, or the person who lives in the city or in the town. Anyway, and the town in that particular case is what? Navadvare Pure Dehi, the city of 9 gates. You know, you talk about the Puranjana story, he lives in the city of 9 gates. The 9 gates, of course, are the eyes, the ears, the genitals, etc., like that, and mouth, and the nose. I left those out. Anyway, so this is actually to make a point without offending anybody, because the Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, says the austerities of speech are what Satya Priya Hitam. Satya Priya Hitam means speaking truthfully, but also pleasingly and beneficially. You know, sometimes people speak the truth, but they're offensive. You can actually speak the truth and be offensive. Like I sometimes jokingly give the example that if you run into some lady in the street who is ugly, and it's the absolute truth, she's ugly, you don't say, "Hey man, you are ugly," even though it's the not absolute truth, but it's relative, of course, but it's the truth. You're ugly. Or if someone has an ugly kid, you don't say, "That kid is ugly." You just don't say anything at that point. You don't have to lie. Or you can make up something, some good quality. "Oh, that kid has nice ears," even though the nose is just like stretches like 1 meter out. So Satya Prihitam, truthfully, pleasingly, beneficially. So those who are preaching Krishna consciousness, they have to utilize these techniques often. I mean, there's so many stories. I mean, you have the story in the Bhagavatam about the Avaduta Brahman who was talking to Maharaj Yadu, and he's explaining detachment from the material world in terms of different examples. Like he even talks about a prostitute, Pingala, you know, who just like was frustrated one night because she couldn't find any customers. And so, you know, it's not necessarily true that these stories actually happened, because the whole purpose of the Bhagavatam is to present things in such a way that people become advanced in devotional service, become detached from this material world. And so stories are absolutely necessary. One other story that comes into mind before we start talking about the topic of this verse is the story of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu preaching to Sanatana Goswami. And he gives this metaphorical example of an astrologer. I think some of you know this story. That once upon a time, there was a man who was suffering. And that, of course, means every man, every woman, or every person. So he was suffering because he was very poor. He didn't have enough to eat. He didn't have sufficient anything, place to stay. And the astrologer came, did his astrology chart. And the astrologer said, "You know, I don't know why you're poor, because your father died in a distant place. And he left you a lot of money. But you just have to know how to, or where to look for the money." And he actually buried it in the earth. There's a story, it's from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He actually buried it in the earth. And you have to look in the proper direction. You know, if you actually go to the south, for example, that's not a good place to dig, because there's going to be wasps and drones. That doesn't mean, you know, drone airplanes like that. Drones means like bees that bite, you know, like yellow jackets. You know, we have wasps here sometimes, and the yellow jackets. One time, Mother Krishna Priya got bit by a yellow jacket. She had to go to the hospital. So these wasps and drones are like the karma kandya practices, which most people from India are engaged in. You know, they're doing some worship for some material purpose. Even they're worshiping Krishna, for example. They have this, Satyanarayan Katha, where they do talk about how if you worship God, and so many people worship God before, they've got some material benefits. So that's one side. And then the west side, you go to the west side, then there's a ghost. You start to dig up, I guess the ghost will come out of the ground or something like that. And the ghost is considered the Jnanakanda aspect of the Vedic literatures or society. Jnanakanda means one is interested in obtaining knowledge ultimately for the purpose of liberation. And then he says, don't dig in the north because there's a black snake there. And that black snake represents the impersonal yoga practice, Kaivalya, you know, merging into the existence of the Absolute. But if you dig in the east, then you'll find the treasure. So also that's very indicative that India is to the east, at least from here. In some countries, like if you're in Fiji, India is to the west. Or it's in the east if you go all the way around the earth. But anyway, so these metaphors are very, very important insofar as teaching Krishna consciousness. Oh. Just when we're getting to the topic that Mayapur will enjoy. So anyway, these metaphors are very, very important in order to get people to understand, and then ultimately they think, hey, that's me. You know, that every man is me, or the person looking for the wealth is me, so I better straighten out. And after a while, it does hit you. Just like, last night I was thinking about, the whole Bhagavatam is talking about the story of King Yati. I mean, King Yati is not a metaphorical story, but I was just thinking King Yati, he's getting attached, and then he understands it's time to renounce everything, and I was thinking, hey, also, I'm a sannyasi, I stay in one place, I start to get attached, but then I was thinking about the attachments. The attachments cause pain, not because the people will harass me, sometimes that happens too, but the attachments cause pain because ultimately you lose them. I mean, I was thinking how heavy this material world is. Here I am in North Carolina enjoying all my friends and associates and, teasing Mayapur and everything like that. And I'm thinking, when I die, I got to say goodbye to them. I said, uh-oh, I'm getting attached. So therefore, isn't it? I mean, you really get attached. I think more to the people than to the, at least for me, more than to the people than the paraphernalia. Because I was looking at my house and thinking, there's my nice swing there I got from India. Can I leave it? And then I was thinking, yeah, that's not a big problem. Can I leave it? That's not a big problem. Then I was thinking, Mayapur, can I leave him? I said, no. How could you do that to me, Krishna? Can't I take him with me? So anyway. So it's really the attachment to the people is the strongest. And just like, of course I gave that example of one time there was a devotee in the hospital and it was his mother and his wife were there. And they were just like, don't leave us, don't leave us, don't leave us. He was in the ICU. You remember that, right? I even slept in my car in the parking lot just to be with him all the time, in that parking lot of the hospital. And he said, don't leave us, don't leave us. And he was, I don't know what he was thinking, but anyway, he was in the ICU. And so it's like that, it's just like you leave someone, you're not going to see them again. That is so incredibly heavy, isn't it? I mean, it's one thing to go on a trip, you talk to them, you have a video call with them, do you still love me? So, but then never to see someone, it's heavy. It's heavy. And just, when you're like Yati here, every day with Devyani, I mean, there's so much attachment that develops. And I'm not just talking about, the sex life here, which is actually the main topic, but it's just so much attachment. It's like, it's deep. So therefore you have this vanaprastha and sannyasa life at the end, where one keeps wandering. Because when you wander, you're always saying goodbye to people. I was thinking about that. Isn't it? You're always saying hello, goodbye. Like the 6 Goswamis, they probably wouldn't sleep under the same tree for more than a few days, a day or 2 or 3 or something. Anyway, so that's one topic here. And then with the main topic here, the Prabhupada talks about in the purport, which I'm trying to avoid because it's so heavy. Where Prabhupada says, basically the subject matter of the purport is, attraction for women is the impetus for economic development, housing, and many other things meant for living comfortably in this material world. So, economic, all that means is what's called pavarga. Anyone heard of this word pavarga before? Pavarga means in the material. I'm gonna actually analyze the word as Prabhupada did, and the opposite is Apavarga Vartmani, the path of liberation. So Pavarga, Apavarga, and Prabhupada analyzes, and the Acharyas analyze this word Pavarga in a very interesting way. It's composed of different parts, different letters. So the first part is Pa, and Pa means, in Sanskrit, Parabhava, which means defeat. Because ultimately, it's like that, what is that, myth of Sisyphus from Greek mythology. If you don't know that, I'll tell you about it. Sisyphus was punished, so he has to roll a stone up a hill, right? And then what happens? The stone rolls down again. He has to roll it up again. And I was thinking it's like the monthly mortgage payments. I'm not encouraging you in renunciation, don't worry. I'm trying my best to avoid it. So it's like the monthly mortgage payments, that the bills just come. I mean, because I'm responsible for making sure the bills in the temple are paid. And every month is like you get harassed by the electric bills, right? Because we had the electric bill come in yesterday. And, it's a lot. I mean, every month the temple pays, between the temple and the houses there and everything like that, it's like well over $1,000, $1,200, $1,300 a month. I mean, even this one building with all of its accoutrements I think it was $440 per month. Because we got air conditioning downstairs, and that's just electricity. That's not the gas for cooking. That's not the renovations. That's not anything. So it's like coming at you every month. It's like it's a monster. You just, it's like those stories that you put someone in the grave, and it comes. I'm not trying to scare you. Anyway, this is the verse in purple. What can I do? And it just keeps coming out until you find that stake. This, what is it? The silver stake or something. It just sticks in the heart, and it doesn't come out of the coffin anymore. So it's like sannyas when you just like, isn't it? It doesn't. You don't worry about it anymore. Of course, sannyas in this kind means you do have to worry because you're responsible for so many people. You're responsible for the bills. Your disciples are coming to you and say, can you give us something for our house? Help us build a house. It's Kali Yuga, what can you do? The grasses come begging to the sadhus. So anyway, so it's like that. It's defeat. No matter how hard you work. I mean, with this body, no matter how much you put into the body, just like recently I had these operations, to solve the one problem. Hernia operation and cataract operation, them thinking, wow, I'm good to go. And as good as new. I was talking to one devotee yesterday, encouraging him to have a hernia operation. Because he has a hernia. I said, look, I'm as good as new. But guess what? Something else will pop out. It's like I was in India with my work, and it got to the point like that I had to put my tooth under the pillow because the tooth fell out. Right? Unfortunately, there was a tooth fairy there. I got money under the pillow. It's true. I actually found money under the pillow. I don't know where it came from. And it was dollars too in India. So that's Pa, and then after that is actually Pa. Pa means polena, which means foam at the mouth, because one's working really hard. I mean, don't blame me for this. And then after that, you work really hard, rolling the stone up the hill, paying the electric bill, comes back down at you again, roll it up, comes back down at you. And then another part is Ba. It's not like Baba, little sheep or something like that. It means bondage. One becomes bound. What happened to my freedom? And then ba, which means boya, or piti, or which means fear. What happens? Just like sometimes, I'm just talking not about household life in particular, just about anything in the material world, just managing the temple. Sometimes you hear, oh well, this pujari or cook got sick. What are we going to do? Who's going to take care of the servant? Isn't it? But these things are good for Krishna. Anyway, the point is not to just discourage you all from and send you all to the Himalayas, which Michael wants to go to, is that goodbye cruel world, so to speak, is if you accept these things for Krishna, like if you're a householder, here's a good one. Here's a good one for Sri Arjuna. If you're a householder for Krishna, or if you're running a temple for Krishna, or running a zone, or taking responsibility for the deity worship for Krishna, yes, it's hard, it's a struggle. But that struggle is purifying. If you're fearful, like Prabhupada was in anxiety. What was he in anxiety about? So many things about the devotees, about when Tamal Krishna Maharaj went to buy the land in Mayapur, and he had all this money, which would not be a lot of money today, but anyway, he had all these rupees in his improvised money belt. Prabhupada was in anxiety. Prabhupada, he was just pacing up and down, waiting for Tamal Krishna Maharaj to come back. So that was fearfulness, right? But that fearfulness is purifying. So any of these things, like one is a good grahasta, see? And one, I'm not that bad. So if one is a good grahasta, and he's accepted these things for Krishna, then all these different struggles and everything like that, they're purifying, like paying the bills every month for the temple. Even though, every time I see an envelope with, Piedmont Electric on it, every time we see an envelope, or get an email, nowadays they send it to you in emails, even before the bill comes in the mail, or for the credit card company or something like that, because we have people with ISKCON credit cards charging for the flowers, charging for the boga. Every time it comes in, an email, it's just tightness in the throat. And how can I go on? And it gets you to the point. It gets you to the point you're just like so much anxiety about money, just like I was driving with Mayapur the other day, and kept the windows, it was very hot, and we had the windows down, and it was very hot in the car, and he said, why don't you use the air conditioner? I said, I'm just trying to save money. It gets to that point, so much anxiety, and I said to him, if God wanted us to have air conditioning, he would have given it to us. So anyway, but that anxiety is purifying. You understand? It's not a bad thing. So in Krishna consciousness, in running the temple, in grahastha life, that's purified. And then finally, ma, the final, pavarga, ma, is mritu. Because ultimately we have to realize that we're not the doers, and ultimately, we have to go, sayonara. Means goodbye. And then ultimately we have to understand what nitya nityanam chaitanya chaitanam eko bahunam yobhadadaputama. It's Krishna. Krishna's maintaining everything. So, but anyway, anxiety in Krishna's service and fighting for Krishna is superior to renouncing and everything going to the Himalayas. Yeah, that's just a cop-out. According to Krishna in the Gita, Krishna says renunciation, when you renounce things because they're just so much trouble, that's renunciation in the mode of passion. We're not interested in we want renunciation in the mode of goodness. Well, one does things because it's the right thing to do. And just takes the austerity. What? Tapo divyam putra vijena satvam. Shudyad yasmad brahmashokra chvanantam. This is what Lord Rishabhadeva says. He says to his sons that, you should engage in austerity. And our austerity, Prabhupada one time said, austerity management in this world is actually austerity. And so, we've somehow or other taken that austerity for Krishna. And that's anxiety, but and sometimes we think, what is it, California, here I come, right? No, sometimes we think, it's just like, let's head for the hills, or head for the hill. The hill, go down, go down. So anyway, that's what we should understand. But this Yati had not accepted this whole thing for purification. He accepted this whole sense gratification and hard work for just like self-centeredness. It was self-centeredness. Of course, he did want purification. He understood he had to fulfill his duty, etc., like that. So then the final point here is an interesting story. We have interesting stories about how attraction for women is the impetus for economic development. This is one interesting story I'd like to tell, I've told before. Is once upon a time, when the English were settling North America, that's where we are in North America, in case you haven't figured that out. So when the English were settling North America, they sent a group of men to establish a colony. They didn't send any women. They thought, these women, they're just weak. They should just stay home, stay in England. So they sent a group of men, and this group, I forget how many it was, but it was quite a number on a boat. And it was on a cruise ship. They sent them over, and these men, basically, it was a mess. Because the men basically went native. They were just like, it was a mess. They weren't cleaning their doties at all, because they weren't doties, but anyway, they weren't cleaning the pants. They would just like eat anything, like berries from the trees, or, of course, they also ate birds, stuff like that, like Thanksgiving turkeys and stuff like that. So it was a big mess. Nothing was happening. We weren't building any buildings. I guess they just put tarps. Of course, they didn't have tarps in those days. They just put, somehow or other, they just like lived there, and they would just like grew their beards long. And it was disgusting, even from a material perspective. So in England, the Queen of England and whoever else was in charge was thinking, what are we going to do? We're not establishing any colonies here in America. That's not a colony. I mean, first of all, if the men were just there, they'd just die anyway after some time. And so they recruited a group of upstarts. No, so they recruited a group of, adventurous ladies and put them on a boat. Love boat. So anyway, they put them on a boat and sent them all to good old America. And I forget what colony it was. You can look it up in that. You've heard about it before.
Yes, this is what you're saying is factual.
Yeah. They sent them over. The men took one look at them, and they started building their houses and working hard, and everything became just like beautiful. God bless America. That's why we have America, because of the ladies. Otherwise, we'd just be a bunch of aborigines living in the trees, Anyway, so that proves the point. Of course, Prabhupada was often quoting this English economist Marshall, where he said, that the household life is the impetus for economic development, and it is very important. I mean, how can that be, let's say, utilized in Krishna consciousness? Because generally the sannyasis, they preach against household life. But I'm not preaching against household life. I love the householders because they're the stomach of society. And they give the sannyasis donations. Anyway, so because there's a varnashram system and each and every one has an important part to play. The impetus may be the family life, that's true. I mean, like if you go to see our congregation in Cary, Morrisville, and everything like that, they're all living in houses that are $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 houses, isn't it? Actually, and the houses are right next to each other, no land, and they're really flimsy. But anyway, whatever. Not that I'm going to comment on the houses, but in any case, they spend so much money because there's economic development. But these same personalities are supporting the preaching of Krishna consciousness. So it's dovetailed in Krishna consciousness like that. Like, you know, some of our members, I mean, yesterday we got a nice contribution from an old friend in who used to live in Greensboro for the new hall that we're making here. And he's certainly married, economic development, he had hotels, he's retired right now. And so it all becomes purified. So all that work that one does in household life, in maintaining a family, bringing up Krishna consciousness, is part of bhakti. It's dovetailing Krishna service, isn't it? Like we said in the fourth chapter of the Gita, Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavir, Brahmagno, Brahmanam, Brahmatena Gantavyam, Brahma Karma Samadhinam. It was an interesting verse. That's one of the famous verses of the Brahma Kumaris. I'm not a member of the Brahma Kumaris, don't worry. So it means if one makes arpanam, one serves and makes an offering to Brahman, like that means the Krishna conscious movement, arpanam Brahma Havir. Like it's like here's a metaphor against, or a simile. It's like throwing ghee in the fire. That the ghee is just a material substance. But when it goes in the fire, the ghee becomes purified. Like Prabhupada would often say, like if there was smoke coming from the sacrificial fire, he said that smoke is purified. It's interesting, in New York, Prabhupada was doing this fire sacrifice. And of course, the neighbors really hated it. Sometimes the neighbors would pour water from an upper floor, and the water would drip down on the devotees because they were so upset because of the noise, basically the noise of the smoke, everything like that, or even the chaunts, you know, when they would make the dal. It was just like we'd have to run out of the temple screaming. I remember that. And the neighbors did not like that. What are you people doing? So Prabhupada said that smoke in that instance, because he just kept the windows closed. The smoke is purified. Ordinarily, if you smoke a cigarette, it's not purified. It's the opposite. So the smoke is purifying. So when one makes an offering to Brahman, the same thing is just a mundane substance. You know, whether it's one's duty in household life or whether it's working the job or whatever it is, then the person gets purified, the sacrifice is purified, the results of the sacrifice are purifying. Brahmakarma Samadhinam, and in this way, one's absorbed in Brahman. Prabhupada often would say, not often, but sometimes he would say, that someone who's working in the factory, even though it appears to be a mundane economic development thing, he says that's as good as the sannyasi working in the factory. So we're not encouraging everyone to work in the factory. You work in the incense factory. So, but the point is, one shouldn't denigrate these different spiritual orders. These are spiritual orders: brahmacharya, grahastha, vanaprastha, sannyasa. But yati is not exactly, you know, he's doing things, he's Vedic, he's worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he's becoming attached to the results. The whole point, as Krishna advises Arjuna in the Gita, is do your duty, but don't be attached to the results. You know, you have a right to your duty, but you don't have a right to the results. And you should work hard. Probably another thing Prabhupada says, work hard now and samadhi later. So, you know, one has to be very careful not to take these particular injunctions or instructions in this verse and purport out of context. So, anyway, that's all I have to say. Any questions or comments does anyone have about any of these things? Pravarga top of our economic development. I thought it was a balanced approach. Questions? You have a question? Yeah. Okay.
The history of this country. It's actually, before the factories, we were slaves when we first came here, when Columbus came.
Yeah.
All they tell us afterwards is Washington, Washington was the president, and that was it. That's all we know in history, books, in the school system. That's all we
Yeah, there's a lot more. There's how the Indians were mistreated.
Yeah,
There's a
that's
lot of
where Thanksgiving came from. It came from the colonists, not America.
Yeah.
They were infiltrated back in 1776, but in the beginning we were slaves, but then we became pioneers, we became we were travelers, we were just exploring all around this country. We headed west. We became cowboys,
That's good.
That's why we have movies, since the 1940s, the cowboys.
Yeah. And Krishna was also a cowboy. Did you know that? And not exactly like the cowboy movies. He didn't carry 6 guns, Anyway, Krishna took care of cows. Yeah, Krishna was like that too. He's a village boy. He's not a city boy.
I just want to make a statement that the people all the way from the year 500 all the way up to the present, the people in this country was always good. The common man was okay.
Yeah.
It was the people.
Prabhupada says the leaders that are bad.
It was the leaders that screwed everything up.
Yeah. Prabhupada said that because people follow the leaders, and the leaders actually are misleaders. They're blind, and they're leading people who are blind. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Jai. Radha Leka and Krishna Chandra, thank you for joining us. Got a lot of people. All right. Gauranga. Jai. Radha Golokananda ki jai. Jai. Radha Golokananda.